Welcome to the Dynasty Dummies podcast. I am Zach Reed. I am joined by JMic at JMic Check. This is the first iteration of the rookie running backs, the 2024 Dynasty Dummies rookie Hootenanny running backs, part one. We're getting into this. I know you're excited because this class has been much ballyhooed. It's a great running back. Well, we got running backs anyway, and we're here to talk about them. I'm excited about a few of them, and you know there will be some fantasy goodness at points in this class, from this class, because there are some players who are interesting, who'll get there, who'll produce. But JMic, how are you this evening?
I was trying to hit the button here for the applause track, but instead all that I had was crickets. I didn't even have an applause button when you were talking about the ballyhoo for this running back group. I'm excited to be with you today, Zach. I know that people have long wanted to be excited about running backs and rookie running backs and infusion of youthful talent at the running back position, and the old guard are now finally free agents and moving teams. And I don't know, dog. I don't know. But regardless, I'm excited to be with you. Thank you to everyone who's sent us some love, whether it be on Twitter, DMs, text messages, the folks who are checking us out for the first time. Thank you. For the folks who have been rocking and rolling with us for a while, thank you. We're having a blast with this. And thankfully, we're just getting started. This is only week 3. Of many to come. We've already got a ton of submissions for our catch-alls. So who knows exactly how long the catch-alls will be or how many catch-all episodes we're going to have, but we're going to have a fun time with it. And before we get into the meat of the episode, Zach, I know that you always have great musings, great thoughts, great things that are really churning in your soul. Please bless us with what's been on your mind.
Well, this week it's the combine. I mean, we just had the combine. It's been all of the talk on Twitter, everywhere you go. It's combine numbers or, people's opinions about it. And lots of people are going to continue to be throwing combine numbers at you, athleticism metrics. They're going to throw burst score and spark score and size adjusted speed score and BMI and all of that. There are going to be thresholds. There are going to be hard decks. There are going to be outlier talk, and there's going to be outright liars about this whole thing too. On the other side, you're going to have people tell you that the combine doesn't matter. I just spent an entire evening last night with Peter Howard and him telling me how the combine doesn't matter. And I'm mostly on that side of things, but the measurements are nice to get from a verified source. But people will tell you the drills, for everything from the 40-yard dash to the 3-cone to the gauntlet, those are mostly noise. And if you look at the numbers, like especially for wide receivers, that's absolutely the case. There is not a sticky combine number for wide receivers. And I think part of that is because wide receiver is such a big bucket for about 5 or 6 different positions. And so it's hard to narrow down the right number to gauge all of that and the success at the next level. But I think really, if you back up from all of this, the truth, as it so often does, lies in the middle and is dripping with nuance. I think that if you're trying to predict the NFL draft order and that's your goal, the combine matters because the combine matters to the NFL. The same thing if your rookie draft happens before the NFL draft, and I have a league that is the case. The combine absolutely matters because the combine numbers do affect the NFL draft and draft capital. But if your draft happens after the NFL draft, or your process or model takes into account draft capital, and it should, draft capital is the best number we've got, the best way we have of predicting who's going to be successful at the next level. You're already counting the combine because the NFL is already counting the combine when they make their draft picks. So it's funny to me. I've seen a lot of vitriol, a lot of back and forth a lot of people run numbers out. I've even seen Xavier Worthy take heavy flack for running so fast. And so the bucket that he's in is basically John Ross and Henry Ruggs and that group of a little bit less than stellar group of wide receivers. And so people are already starting to knock him down because of the combine, when in actuality, the production profile matters a heck of a lot more than the combine does if you're talking about profiles. And for us, we're not even paying attention to any of that until we're completely done our evals, and then we go back and listen to the guys with the numbers and do that crosshatch and kind of figure out what we missed and what we need to go back and look at and where we disagree. But that has been kind of churning for me this whole week, is relax. The combine is fun. I love watching it. I was there. You and I were DMing back and forth when Xavier Worthy was, burning things up. We're DMing back and forth when, in another 2 minutes, when Audric Estime crosses the 40-yard line, we'll be DMing about that too. But it's fun. It does matter, but it doesn't matter always in the way that we talk about it.
No question about that. And I think that and normally the combine is fun because we get to lean into the hyperbole a little bit. We get to lean into the fun, the pomp and circumstance of it all. And for whatever reason, all of a sudden, fast guy running fast got people up in arms, which was just weird for the thing. Something happened while it was extraordinary. The thing happened that we thought would happen, and then it becomes a death knell as to why we can't be excited or why we can't continue to enjoy the fun. So, hey, it's draft season, fun abounds. The beauty of this wonderful life that we lead and even this country that we navigate is that, you know what? You have a voice. And if you're willing to put it out there, somebody will listen somewhere, somehow, some way. Zac, I've got a quick musing of my own, if I may. I have, with the combine obviously just happening last weekend, and I don't remember if I did a JMic's journal on this or not. And if I haven't, I have to go back. I'm going to write one on this because it matters a lot to me. And it happened a while back, but I can't remember if I did or didn't. Anyway, point being, got some awesome words from Dr. Nadia West. And Dr. Nadia West, for those that may not know, she was the first Black female lieutenant general and the highest ranking woman to graduate from the U.S. Military Academy. She's first Black Surgeon General of the U.S. Army, first Black female Major General of the Army's active component. And I mean, just so many accolades down the line. I could keep going for a little while. She once spoke to me at work, actually a group of folks that I work with, and someone had asked the question, hey, when you're dealing with nonsense regarding the feelings that come of not feeling good enough, not feeling like you measure up, not feeling adequate. She's like, well, what do you tell people? What do you have them focus on? What do you have them lean into? And her response was 4 words: focus on the mission. And obviously, on its face, it can sound like a canned answer, but she goes on to explain, hey, someone, somewhere, at some point, saw fit for you to be right where you are at this time. So when you're looking at a role that you play at work or whatever the case is, somebody put you there because they believe that you could fulfill the role, that you could fulfill the duty. And if you think about it, when you have something like an army group that's setting up camp, a group of soldiers setting up camp, everyone doing their job is not only important, it becomes something that is absolutely vital, because if they're setting up camp one night and it's someone's job to be able to stay up and pay attention to what's happening while others get to rest, well, if that person nods off or lollygagging, goofing off, that could mean that the lives of everyone in that camp are now in danger. And so the importance of doing your job means that it involves everyone around you in your sphere of influence needing you to do you and needing you to be you. And so as we navigate this space of not just combine, but life at large and all the things that we navigate, I think one of the things that we need to remember is when we focus on the mission, whatever that mission is, it allows us to push and keep at bay those thoughts of not being good enough, the imposter syndrome, all of the frustrations, the sadness, all the things that want to creep in to tell us that we're not enough. When we focus on the mission, we're able to really lean in and take care of business and lean into our strengths and our giftings to be able to really be a blessing to others and be a major impact to those around us. And if you think about that, when we're thinking about these running backs, these guys are going to get roles somewhere, somehow, some way. And no, it's not going to be as deep as setting up camp somewhere in the middle of nowhere, fighting any kind of foreign forces. But someone, somewhere, some coaching staff, some front office is going to employ these guys to be part of NFL offenses. And so whether you're excited about this group or not, remember, someone is going to see fit to put them in different roles, whether you're thrilled about them or not. So having a clear understanding or clear position as to how you're feeling about these players now specifically, but also obviously after the draft comes, is going to matter a good deal when we think about process. Zach, I'm sorry for the rambling. Had to get that out. I was churning in my soul earlier today, and I was like, you know what? I got to make sure that I slide this in on the pod as well.
Oh, I love it. That's where we're here. We are. We're focused on the mission.
Yes, 100%. That's where we're at. Now, let's talk about it. On the menu tonight, we've got 6 running backs, and the order's not anything special. There's not any kind of rhyme or reason, just the first 6 that we think that at least coming into the combine were probably a lot of the folks' first 6 in any particular order. But tonight we've got Jonathon Brooks out of Texas, redshirt sophomore, who had an outstanding season for the Longhorns. Braelon Allen, who's a name that many folks know from the Devy circles and a guy that folks have really been excited about for several years now, kind of the heir apparent to Jonathan Taylor and everything that happened there for the Wisconsin Badgers, junior there for the Badgers. We've got Trey Benson out of Florida State, big senior who obviously captured hearts at the combine with how big and fast that he was. We've got Blake Corum from your national champion Michigan Wolverines coming in as a senior as well with Benson. Bucky Irving out of Oregon, obviously an incredibly successful season out west for the Ducks. He's a junior there. And then lastly, Audric Estime out of Notre Dame, absolute powerhouse of a runner, junior for the Fighting Irish that we'll be talking about today. Zach, before we get into the running backs, is there anything else that we need to do regarding table setting or making sure that we are in the space now that we're shifting from wide receivers to running backs? Anything that you want to highlight to make sure that people are well and prepared for where we're about to go?
No, I think the only thing that I will say is don't forget, and if this is your first time, so we've been through 12 wide receivers, we will revisit. We will have that catch-all show. So we are shifting gears to running back, but we will come back if there were wide receivers that we missed that you think we need to see. Let us know. Our DMs are open. You can send a message to me. You can send a message to the Dynasty Dummies at Dynasty Dummies on Twitter. Like, get a hold of us, and we will do our absolute best to put eyes on everybody that you want to hear about. But now it's time to shift over. We're going to attack the ground game.
All right, and attack the ground game we will, starting in Austin, Texas. So many Longhorns this year, Zach. Jonathon Brooks, 6 feet, 216 pounds, redshirt sophomore out of Texas. Now, that 216 pounds is interesting because we know that Jonathon Brooks, while having an absolutely tremendous season in 11 games, 187 attempts on the ground, over 1,100 yards rushing, 10 touchdowns, giving us that wonderful Zach Reed rule approved 25 receptions for 286 yards and a score. Unfortunately, Jonathon Brooks tore his ACL late in the season. I believe it was in early November against TCU. He's continuing to just have an awesome season and unfortunately tore his ACL, so did not take part in the combine. So I'm curious about that 216 pounds for him, Zach. He hasn't been able to work out. He hasn't been able to really obviously do the things that you'd hope for. But regardless, had a tremendous season. Again, a shining star in that offense that already has a couple of wide receivers that could be first-round talents. And Jonathon Brooks was the straw that stirred the drink down in Austin. Zach, let's talk a little bit Jonathon Brooks. Go.
My grandfather used to say excuses are like rear ends. Everyone has one and nobody wants to hear yours. He had a lot of really great sayings too. I wish I could just run through a bunch of them, but there are going to be a lot of excuses surrounding Jonathon Brooks's lack of work. He played behind Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson in his first 2 years at Texas, seeing just 54 total touches. This past season saw Brooks break out. He ran for at least 98 yards in 8 of 10 games and averaged over 100 yards a game until an ACL tear ended his season in November. Jonathon Brooks is quick and he is fast. His initial burst to the line of scrimmage might be the best in the entire 2024 class. And once he hits an open hole, his secondary acceleration can separate him from a defense in a hurry. Brooks has very good vision, both inside between the tackles and outside of the tackle box. When he does get hit, for my money, I think Brooks has excellent contact balance and he finishes runs strongly. He ends up with that leg drive, that finish forward that we like to see. You mentioned the 25 receptions in 2023. He's an adequate receiver. He brings a well-balanced skill set, I think, with him to the NFL.
An incredibly smooth mover with ball in hand. And probably for my money, Zach, within the guys that we'll be talking about today, the most instinctive and most creative runner of this group. This is a player when we're looking at Jonathon Brooks consistently through film, what you're seeing is him being able to not only finish the run strong, like you highlighted, Zach, not only give that extra burst at any level whenever he's slowing down or breaking a defender down, but his ability at the line of scrimmage to make first defenders miss when the blocking breaks down, or when he's out on the edge, to be able to simply understand angles the way that we talk often about the actual wide receivers. He is a geometry breaker. And I'm really excited about his prospects. And ideally, obviously, when he's coming back from the ACL and as he continues to heal, that we continue to see a guy who's very confident in his skill set that moves, again, very differently, I think, than a lot of folks in this class. With that said, Jonathon Brooks obviously didn't ever get his shine until he finally had this opportunity after Bijan left, after Roschon Johnson left. So tell us more about why Jonathon Brooks may not have broken out prior to now.
Well, the injury concerns are obvious, and we're not going to know the prevailing thoughts inside NFL circles until after the medical checks, after the draft happens. We'll see his draft capital and we'll see what they think of his knee. Outside of that, I thought that you mentioned that make him miss. Brooks isn't necessarily a sudden cutter. So like there are a couple of backs and Corum we'll get to who I think is a really sudden cutter. Brooks isn't necessarily that, but holy cow, he is a player who makes the most of wide open spaces. And you talked about that geometrical running and getting angles. Absolutely. And I think the lack of suddenness shows up when Brooks runs parallel to the line of scrimmage. And I think that's really his biggest hurdle is when he tries to get to the outside. if he's unable to get to the edge, he's often also unable to make that quick cut back to take advantage of a hole opening up back to the inside. But once he's in space, he does some serious damage. Jonathon Brooks may have the highest ceiling of any of the backs in the 2024 class. He has burst, he has speed, he has big playability, he has solid hands. I think the question for Dynasty is going to be whether or not his eventual production will be worth waiting for. And since the appeal of drafting running backs is the potential for immediate return on investment, selecting Jonathon Brooks kind of flies in the face of that conventional wisdom, but at least you'll have an excuse if he doesn't hit.
And that's the thing, Zach. Bypassing a couple of my I guess downgrades for him regarding his game for the sake of making sure that people understand that very thing, Zach. Everyone doesn't come back from their injuries the same, right? And so we're looking at a guy who tears his ACL in early November. And obviously rookie training camp is typically what, June, July, something like that. And not sure how he's going to be or what's necessarily going to be expected of him. So understanding that we may not get his absolute best this season. And if we're not seeing it, he's definitely someone worth waiting for. When we think about the likes, and I know you and I have discussed it before in reference to the likes of a Kyron Williams, and even a couple weeks back, you were just talking about, hey, even if they're not doing something, if these running backs aren't doing something in the first year, like let's hold on, let's hold out for a moment, let's give it time to breathe. He's 100% one of those candidates that if you're not getting anything or it doesn't look great year one, I think you may want to take a step back, see the entire forest, and better understand it's not really about right now and what he's going to be able to give you right now coming back. But ideally, he gets put in a position in his second year to be part either of a committee or be someone that we think is really special going forward. Incredibly smooth mover. The whole Cadillac piece being like slow is smooth and smooth is fast. For anyone who's ever ridden in those old school big body Cadillacs, you just kind of gliding every little bump. You just have this nice little glide. And so in terms of the quickness, and I think I agree with you in that, specifically trying to get out to the edge, but the absolute stop isn't something that's world beating or world changing. But I do think that his ability as he continuously has motion, his ability to be able to break folks down, and not so much to be able to throw on 15 moves, but he every move has a purpose. And I think that with him, it's really cool to see on a play-to-play basis as he's chaining things together. So I'm excited, and I think I 100% agree with you in that I think he has the highest ceiling of this group of folks, and I'm pumped. I'm pumped. I think he's going to be. I think he's an awesome prospect to be able to be excited about and root for. All right. From the warm confines of Austin, Texas, what up, Bun G? Gabe Gearing down in Austin. We move on to Wisconsin. Cold Madison, where we look at the likes of Braelon Allen. Again, a name that many probably know, probably love. Straight out of Wisconsin. 3 years of really pristine production. This final season, not his best, but we also have to remember, got the new offensive coordinator, new coaching staff out there, scheme change, a lot changed in Wisconsin, but he was still able to provide production in 11 games, 181 rushes, 984 yards, 12 touchdowns, and even 28 receptions. Again, for those that may not know, and I probably should have set this up previously, the Zach Reed rule, you'll hear me reference it somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but also understanding that essentially if a running back has at least 20 catches in a season in college, that I don't remember what the exact number is anymore, Zach, but I'm sure that you'll chime in here and lay that on us in terms of what we're looking at for their future production. But what does that look like?
Yeah, so if you were looking for a 40 plus catch season in the NFL, which is what we're looking for the high end running backs, the pass catchers, the number was 87%. And I haven't done the math on this past year, so it may have changed by then, but 87% of running backs who hit that mark in the pros have had a season where they caught 20 or more passes in college. My theory is, and again, it's not a hard and fast rule. It's a more of a check mark, more of a threshold that we like to see. But my thought is the NFL is not necessarily that creative at that level. They draft you to do what you've done. And so to expect a player to do something different than what he's done in college at the NFL level, it seems a little counterintuitive. So that's the threshold, that 20 reception season. That's what we're looking for pass catchers.
There you have it. Braelon Allen being a guy that in his first 2 seasons was as productive as you'll ever see from a running back at the collegiate level. In both seasons in 2021 and 2022, over 1,200 yards rushing, 11 touchdowns or more, consistently getting it done down in, down out. Braelon Allen, Zac, let's talk a little bit about a guy that people have been frothing at the mouth for many a moon.
Yeah, badgers as a species have proliferated and can be found on 4 of the 7 continents. Badger running backs have also proliferated. Wisconsin products James White, Melvin Gordon, and Jonathan Taylor have each made a mark on the landscape of the NFL in recent years. Braelon Allen is poised to be the next Badger to enter the NFL, and in a big way. Really big, like 6'1", 235 pounds big. His frame screams between the tackles runner, and Allen does not disappoint. He's a patient runner. He's willing to let his linemen set up blocks before he tries to attack. And although Braelon Allen is a punishing runner with the ability to deliver bone-jarring hits, he does not seek out contact. And to me, that's a distinction that is very important. That's the John Kelly, trying to run over people, and it doesn't always go that well at the next level when all linebackers are NFL level linebackers. Speed is never going to be Allen's weapon of choice, though, but he does have enough to be a dangerous chunk runner. He's not going to run away from defenders, but that doesn't stop him from running a long way. And perhaps the most interesting aspect of Braelon Allen's profile is his pass catching, which is actually good enough for him to be used on simple screens and as a safety valve.
This man, when he gets rolling downhill, Zac, man, he somewhere Kyle Brandt would be happy. Angry runs, like we're looking at a guy who consistently, when he's getting into the second and third levels of a defense, I think it's maybe something that I saw a little bit different, specifically when he's out that way and he knows that he's not going to necessarily beat someone or run past them. He's looking to punish defenders. I remember watching an Iowa safety get worked like twice in 2 series, and I was like, I'm gonna need you start making some business decisions, my boy, because it is looking dark out here for you. Cleaner hands than you'd think, while not running a myriad of routes, just very smooth. Not necessarily spectacular, but still something that you like to be able to see if he's going to be this guy that's simply running on 2 downs and trying to be able to pick his way through. You'd like to be able to add something in the passing game, and I think that he does that now. Is he going to shine for some team on 3rd down? Probably not, but being able to show the skill in general consistently, specifically in this last season, was a positive. Braelon Allen, though, 3 years at Wisconsin, all this production. Zac, you weren't super excited as you were talking through the good, so tell us the other side of the coin.
So Braelon Allen's avenue of attack is going to be between the tackles, both because that's where he's at his most effective, but also because he's not fast enough to get out to the edge. And the patience that Allen displays letting his blocks develop sometimes turns into hesitancy behind the line of scrimmage, leading him to be tackled for a loss. When there's initial penetration by the defense, Allen loses the one-on-one battle with the defender far too often due to his lack of lateral quickness. And as big as Allen is, I think he's susceptible to being tackled low, losing his balance, and falling forward with that momentum. So, like, you see guys, we talk about being able to pick through traffic. Sometimes he's not great at that. But I think Braelon Allen has the prototypical size and shape that the draft community associates with a successful bell cow running back. He's not quite that, but what he is a between the tackles grinder with enough patience to create chunk plays and enough receiving chops to be a non-zero as a pass catcher. He could easily have high-end running back too in his fantasy future. And it's also one of these where, we always look for the pass catcher plus profile. This is almost a pitching backwards where he's that guy who's going to be a grinder. You expect him to get the carries, but if he's in a backfield where another back gets injured, he's got enough ability in the receiving game to give you some serious fantasy points.
Yeah, and that's, I think, one of the really unique things about a player his size is the number of times where the first defender or the early penetration absolutely paralyzes the play. Feet stop, momentum stops, and it's almost like he has very few to no solutions to be able to win when trouble's incoming. There's not creativity when it comes to a fluidity of forget chaining moves together. Just a matter of being clean in space. I think you'll see flashes at times where he'll have a jump cut, and be able to get through certain areas. But again, that's usually when there's some sort of runway or some sort of airspace for him to be able to navigate. The lack of lateral agility is something that, again, if he's not put in a position to be consistently given that runway, and I know there's always players that we talk about this every year, Zach, without that runway that, that they come off as somewhat average. And I'm not saying that Braelon Allen by any means is average, but there are times where with his size and with the power that we tend to see and the physicality that he plays with, there are times where that simply doesn't show, specifically when there's a lot of traffic near the line of scrimmage. So a player that I think, again, was wildly productive in college and someone that folks are really excited about, especially because of his size and obviously the touchdown vulture that he may be, or two down plus player that could be. Not sure that he is all that he's been billed to be over these last couple of years. Moving on, Trey Benson out of Florida State, 6 feet, 216-pound senior for those Tallahassee boys. Trey Benson originally started his career in Oregon, not seeing much in the way of playing time or action there, transfers to Florida State. And as soon as that man got on campus, they was ready to give him carries. In his first season at Florida State back in 2022, 154 carries, 990 yards, and 9 touchdowns. 2023 looked very similar, 156 carries, 906 yards, and 14 touchdowns. We do see 20 receptions in this final season, 227 yards and a score there. Again, Florida State wildly successful when it comes to the win-loss category this past season. And a large part of that was because of Trey Benson. Zach, your words.
Catastrophic knee injury. And that's not exactly the opening line you want to hear when you're discussing a top running back prospect. In December of 2020, Trey Benson tore nearly everything in his knee: ACL, MCL, lateral meniscus, medial meniscus, gracilis. It took 2 full years and a transfer to Florida State to fully recover, but Benson bounced back big time. Trey Benson is a bigger back at 6 foot, 216 pounds. And his weapon of choice, though, is speed. Benson is at his best when he can get into space and chew up ground. He utilizes angles to his advantage once he's into the open field, combining trajectory with that speed to run away from defenders. when a defender does manage to catch Benson, I think he's got really good contact balance at speed, which is not something you necessarily see. You see a lot of running backs will slow into contact, brace, and go. Benson can take a hit at full speed, maintain balance, and keep going, continuing on to tack on extra yards. When there's traffic at the line of scrimmage, Benson's cuts aren't necessarily sudden, but he does manage to get himself out of trouble with kind of sweeping, slaloming cuts.
And Benson being one of the guys that we'll talk about today, maybe one of two. I think we might have already talked about one in Jonathon Brooks. But Benson is not a player that you often see get caught from behind. And obviously, that's something that plays well when we think about the combine and how well he ran, obviously, the 40. And it's that momentum. And I'm so glad that you made the distinction, because I think that his contact balance is vastly different at the before he's got his speed going. And I guess that's something that we'll talk about. But when he's got it going, it's almost like he becomes a runaway freight train where it's like, okay, like we can do this. There are lots of good things that can happen. I like the way that Florida State leveraged him in the passing game, because in the screens that he's able to get, that runway that we just got done talking about regarding Braelon Allen for Trey Benson allows him to just be able to do really good things, because he shows a decent amount of patience, specifically on screens and specifically when setting up space in the passing game. I think there's a lot of things to like. I think there's a lot of things that you can be excited about, specifically because of his ability to break home runs, and that we're looking at a class that really produces a lot of doubles when it comes to big play abilities. But he's the guy that can hit the home run. He's the guy that can get behind the defense and pick his way through at times for really solid gains. That said, again, wasn't getting it done at Oregon, wasn't getting clocked at Oregon, finds himself in Florida State. Zach, what are some of the things regarding Trey Benson's game that you weren't nearly as impressed with?
Well, for all of his size and speed, Trey Benson doesn't have a lot of power. He struggles to avoid that initial defender, and this is kind of what you're talking about. He often gets taken down or stopped by first contact, and before he's up to speed, he even slows down into contact rather than trying to accelerate through it, negating his best asset. If the design hole is open, Trey Benson is fantastic, but things break down if he's forced to create on his own. He gets very hesitant. He slows to the point of stalling out and leaves himself as an easy target for defenders. Trey Benson is a really interesting amalgam of talent, and that makes him capable of being very efficient on few touches, but it also gives him the versatility of being a team's primary back. While he probably opens his career as part of a committee, there is potential for him to grow and step into a fantasy relevant role. Let's roll the dice and give me a Shanahan offense. What do you think?
Yeah, that would be something, Zach. And I think that the lack of creativity, and I'm sorry that I've said this, I feel like several times today, but that is just something that we see consistently year in and year out be something that allows for people to be fantasy difference makers. And if it's not going to be schemed pleasantly for you by the McDaniels of the world, the McVays, the Shanahans, then you're going to have to also give us some answers. And it can't simply be that you've just broken a long run every time. Now, is that nice? Is that great? Yes. But from a down-to-down basis, so as you said, and I love the way that you put that, so many plays stall out because he never gets the opportunity to really get going, to really excel at finding space, because I think that the vision, while again at times being able to just have that one cut to find and go, there's not, at least for what I saw, vision that allows him to be able to pick through space or even see the levels of the defense and seeing the entirety of the field, that allows him to be able to set up blocks, set up cuts, and not just at the first level, but and beyond. Home run hitter. Obviously, I think there's fantasy goodness to be mined there, and somewhat underwhelming in many instances of his game. But again, productive player and really flashes some really awesome things. But I guess we will see as time goes on. All right, running back number 4 on the evening, heading up to Ann Arbor, Michigan to talk through Blake Corum, 5'8", 205-pound senior for the Wolverines. 2022, he finished 7th in the Heisman voting. 2023, finished 9th in the Heisman voting. And this is sharing a backfield with the likes of Donovan Edwards, who's another player that people are excited about for next year's running back class. Blake Corum, though, in this final season, 258 carries. Sheesh. 1,245 yards. Sheesh. 27 touchdowns. Sheesh. Like, what are we talking about? This All-American, obviously, he led the Big Ten in rush attempts. He led the NCAA in touchdowns with those 27. And furthermore, we're looking at a guy who also added to the pass game, while not a significant piece of the passing game. We did see in this 2021 sophomore season, 24 catches for 141 yards and a score as well through the air. So getting it done primarily on the ground. And again, back-to-back seasons of over 200, almost 250 carries. And in that 2022 season as a junior, he gave us 1,400 yards. This is a guy who's been toting the rock. Zach, Blake Corum, and all of this pomp and circumstance, are you in on the fun?
I like Blake Corum, but it feels a little bit to me like running backs may be entering the late Cretaceous period. The true dinosaurs are giving way to their smaller bird-like successors. The landscape of fantasy leaders has changed. It's peppered with undersized, non-traditional backs like Mostert, Kyron Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, James Cook. Life goes on and keeps evolving and adapting. Enter Blake Corum. Corum was the primary ball carrier on an uber-talented Michigan team for the past 2 seasons, in spite of coming in at almost 5'8" and 205 pounds. He has great vision both off tackle and while running inside. In short yardage situations, I think Corum is able to win with quick decision making rather than being able to push a pile. He almost always finds a hole to get the yardage that is needed in goal line and short yardage situations. Corum's burst to the line of scrimmage is excellent, even though his top end speed leaves something to be desired. And as a pass blocker, which doesn't get you fantasy points, but gets you on the field, Corum is surprisingly effective. He does a really good job gaining leverage over defenders by getting low to high and blocking up into a defender in blitz pickup and really stalling out a rush.
That was certainly one of his more impressive things that we would see on tape, is constantly stifling folks and really giving JJ McCarthy time to be able to make plays down the field. Blake Corum's quickness and vision, I think, not just, well, no, I'll try not to be hyperbolic here. It's just really cool to be able to see a guy who sees how everything is happening, and it's almost like really good chess players or virtuosos at whatever it may be, at and around the line of scrimmage. And obviously Michigan's offensive line did a great job of consistently creating space for him. I get it. But his ability to jump to space at any time, it reminds me a lot of Kenneth Walker the third. And when I remember watching him and just seeing consistently him jump cut to space, jump cut to be able to make defenders miss at the first level, to be able to make things happen and squeeze through crevices that maybe some taller, larger players aren't really able to do. Consistently getting caught from behind, but able to find himself out in space. to be able to chunk and, when necessary, lower his head and get what's there. I think that Blake Corum offers a lot of really positive things and does a lot of things from a good to great level, Zach. But what are some of the drawbacks to Blake Corum's game that you weren't so thrilled with?
Well, there's some obvious shortcomings to Blake Corum's game. And although he did have a 24 reception season in 2021, Corum's usage in the passing game doesn't bode extremely well for production at the next level. I also don't think he has a lot of power. So he's not moving piles to get yardage, or like when it's not blocked, like he's not adding yardage by moving defenders. Corum also struggles to beat second level defenders with consistency once he gets through that initial hole. Now, he's got great burst, but that second level speed and acceleration leaves something to be desired. It's also odd to me to see a player of Corum's build primarily run inside or just off tackle. It's the old Devin Singletary type thing where you're watching a player who's a little bit undersized but really excels between the tackles and is not quite fast enough to get all the way outside with regularity. The sun appears to be setting on the bell cow era of running backs. More and more teams are looking to a committee or to the next man up in a backfield. And while Blake Corum doesn't profile as that sexy top end back, I think his skill set is a valuable one and will be at some point during his early NFL career. Life finds a way.
It's so funny, and I guess it just speaks to our connectedness. And while we don't always see things the exact same, like you brought up Devin Singletary, and I very much, when I was watching, was like, man, I remember Devin Singletary being really fun at Florida Atlantic. Like this gives me those vibes, and I don't enjoy trying to do comps unless something like it really screams. But it's so funny that you said that, because I was watching it and thinking, man, this is like, how is a guy this small, this good between the tackles? And I know Michigan's offensive line and blah, 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 but he's really talented in seeing the space. Now, pop in terms of being able to push piles, drag defenders, things of that nature, you don't see a ton of. And just like you said, being the B side of a committee is something that I think that he maybe even could shine in, and even give you spot duty where if you give him enough work or give him the opportunity, and he's, I don't know, getting Kyron Williams type work, or Devin Singletary down the stretch for the Texans last year, you'll have games and stretches where Blake Corum really can shine and do a lot of really positive things for an offense that wants to get downhill. I guess I'd be curious to see him in a kind of zony type scheme where he just has to have the one cut and go, when so much of the things that Michigan did was power scheme and man on man and making things happen in that sense. And I like a lot of what Blake Corum brings. I don't love Blake Corum's game. I think that I think he's talented. I like a lot of what he does. I'm just curious, what does that ceiling look like at the next level? 2 players left on the evening, Zach. This time we're heading up to Eugene, Oregon to talk Bucky Irving. 5'9", 192 for the Oregon Ducks junior. He transferred from Minnesota to Oregon, and that in Minnesota he was getting carries. There were good things happening, and decided, hey, I'm going to go to Oregon. And Oregon allowed him to really flourish in his first season in 2022 with the Ducks. 1,058 yards on 156 carries, 5 touchdowns. You saw him get 31 catches, and all of a sudden, like, man, there's this guy out west that some good things are happening. And then he comes in this final year for the Ducks, 1,180 yards on the ground, 11 touchdowns, and 56 receptions for 413 yards. Zach, the Ducks have routinely had offenses that have been wide open. Let's get folks in space and let playmakers do good things. Bucky Irving seems like a playmaker who does good things when given space. What are your thoughts?
My favorite duck will always and forever be Julie the Cat Gaffney, the beguiling goalie from Disney's D2. 13-year-old me swooned, and she was from just up the road in Bangor, Maine. Bucky Irving has the distinction of being my favorite Oregon Duck running back, at least in the 2024 class. Shout out LeGarrette Blount. Bucky Irving does things that score fantasy points, and he does them well. He is the best pass catching running back in the 2024 class. He is incredibly smooth as a receiver. He has natural hands and is a hands catcher, which is not something you always talk about as a running back. And he transitions very quickly back to a runner after the catch. Irving has decent long speed and is always the next play away from breaking a huge score. Much of Irving's damage is done in space. His ability to track defenders, to cut and force missed tackles in the open field makes him especially dangerous. When Irving works behind the line of scrimmage, he has a knack for strafing that lateral cut until a defender commits, and then Irving will attack vertically up the field using that leverage that he's gained from his angle, which, again, we've talked about a couple other running backs who that was their weakness. This is a strength for Bucky Irving.
I get sometimes watching Bucky Irving, I got the glimpses. I remember we watched Jerome Ford, and Jerome Ford would do a very good job of just keeping square with the line of scrimmage in many instances. And I feel like Bucky Irving would do a lot of that to just be able to make sure that whenever the moment comes that he has to make his move, even though the quickness isn't overwhelming, it allows him to maximize what he does. And I 100% agree with you regarding his hands and his smoothness in the receiving game. And he may be, at least of these six, the runner or the guy that's out in space that leverages more moves than anybody else, whether it's a stiff arm, a spin, a duck under of a defender, and chaining these things together to make the most of what a 192-pound back with his frame is doing. Bucky was really impressive. And again, Oregon's offense is designed to be able to allow him the space. And so you're seeing him run through, I know we reference it sometimes, the Darrell Henderson lanes, and he does very good things with that. His creativity, his smoothness, his ability to transition from catch to run and be able to make the most of those things consistently really have me excited about his prospects at the next level. Even though people weren't excited about his combine, Zach, because of him being a little bit smaller than some thought, not being as explosive, quote unquote, as some thought. What are you seeing in this game that you think may hold him back at the next level?
Well, I think, unfortunately, Bucky Irving isn't going to be mistaken for one of the Bash brothers. He's got far more in common with Kenny Wu and Luis Mendoza than he does with Dean Portman and Fulton Reed. But Irving doesn't have much power, and at 5'9" and 192 pounds, he has trouble finishing runs, especially in traffic. And when Irving is asked to run outside, I think he gets too patient sometimes while trying to get that defender to commit and get strung out all the way to a sideline. So if a defender is disciplined and doesn't overcommit upfield, they can string Irving all the way out and use that sideline as another defender. There is a moment during plays when Irving is asked to run inside and the initial hole closes that he freezes and he is completely unable to decide what his next move is. I think it's very likely that Irving is a change of pace back at the next level, producing most of his fantasy points through the air. He's best suited to a role where he can have efficient touches and work in space It probably won't be a fantasy bonanza without some major injuries in front of him. I think more than likely Bucky Irving will be just okay.
It is stifling, startling when you look at his creativity in space versus his creativity in congestion. And year to year, we talk through picking through the trash and trying to have these guys who are again making that the most of tight spaces. Man, it's really a different player, I think, in those instances because you don't see I don't think you see nearly the creativity or the pop. And I know that Oregon did a ton of pulling linemen, motion, things to really give advantageous opportunities at the point of attack for Bucky Irving and a lot of folks in the offense. But his inability to play with power that allows him to really push forward in between the tackles specifically is something that is a limiting factor for what we see at the next level. In space, I think it could be a lot of fun. Do offenses tend to drive their strategy through undersized guys in space? Not typically. Change of pace, I think he's super creative. I don't really know what it means for what we can expect regarding draft capital or what kind of opportunities that he'll see at the next level. Last, and I guess for some, maybe least, maybe not, Audric Estime, Notre Dame, Fighting Irish, 5'11", 221-pound junior. And you talk about someone who is just a Conan, just He-Man, Barbarian, whatever you want to bring up, whatever you want to talk through. Audric Estime is a destroyer of worlds, someone who is consistently punishing defenders left and right. When we look at the life and times of Audric Estime for the Fighting Irish, this final season being his most productive, 1,341 yards on 210 attempts, 18 touchdowns. Sheesh. The guy was a scoring machine for an offense that kind of had its fits and starts throughout the season. Unfortunately, Zach, in 3 years at Notre Dame, we did not see more than 17 catches, which again happened in this final season for Estime. Consistent bruiser. Again, we think about Notre Dame being a similar offensive line to the likes of Michigan, where they are beating the brakes off of typically any defensive line that they see, constantly pulling players for counter and power plays. Audric Estime shined and gave us many big plays at Notre Dame. Zach, let's talk Estime to close our evening.
So the Golden Dome of the University of Notre Dame's main building is covered in 23.9 karat gold leaf. And when it's regilded, some of the gold flakes that don't stick are collected and they're actually used to mix in with the paint for the football team's helmets. Audric Estime led the Golden Domers in carries, rushing yards, and punched in 18 touchdowns in 2023. Estime's measurements before the combine were all over the place depending on the source, but what they all agreed on is that he is big. A prototypical power runner, Estime has tremendous interior vision. He finds the right running lane and then bowls his way through. When he has a runway to pick up speed, his downhill style makes Estime really tough to bring down. He'll punish defenders who get in his way and has the contact balance to continue on after doling out that hit. And although it has really not much for a bearing on fantasy points, Estime is an excellent pass blocker. He was even brought into the games on third downs as a freshman to protect the quarterback.
Estime is someone that I think all big guys dream of being when you're that that undersized offensive lineman in high school, and you want the opportunity to just, man, we have that one play, that one package that coach told me if we were up 50 on a team, I would be able to get in there and give it a go one time on this power play. And I think that consistently when I look at Estime, he is someone who, again, working best in those power schemes, exhibits good patience and is able to, as well as he can, pick through trash at the line of scrimmage and is not often taken down by the first and sometimes the second guy can on a loop. I feel like over and over again, game after game, if there's space to be had, he's finding it. Is it happening with the quickest a fleet of foot? No. But his ability to constantly deliver first, constantly be first at contact, constantly be first to deliver the boom. He is someone who, for his size and who he is, maximizes what is there to be gained. I think that he exhibits fine vision. I think that he does really probably the best of this group when it comes to running behind your pads. This is probably the best one when it comes to power in this group of guys that we're going to talk about today. I think for some folks, and really you see a range of opinions regarding Audric Estime, even after his combine where he runs the 4.7 240, but jumps pretty well in certain spaces and obviously is an incredibly strong guy and breaks off long plays. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance with Audric Estime. Let's talk about it, Zach, as we close out. What did you not love regarding Estime?
Well, seldom will you find Audric Estime breaking runs to the outside. He just doesn't have that instantaneous speed that you need to get there consistently. And although he is fast downhill, Estime does not get up to the line of scrimmage very quickly. He needs to ramp up to get to full tilt. And for my money, his cuts aren't particularly sharp either. And that leads to a lot of contact with defenders that potentially could have been avoided. And in the receiving game, Estime is a little bit reminiscent of prime Jordan Howard in the way that there's far more talk about his pass catching potential than there are actual receptions. Estime is big, he's fast, he's punishing, and he's powerful. Those are all traits that should turn more than a few heads during the NFL draft process. Although he doesn't have that 3-down profile, I think there's a world in which Estime could find himself succeeding as the thunder portion of a committee in a backfield, kind of the Brian Robinson to the Gibson, in Washington. That sort of back.
Man, and one thing I neglected to mention, which is just, again, it leads to this really strange way that I see Estime. There are so many plays where we'll see him high hurdle second level defenders, third level defenders. We'll see him. I watched, I think it was a play against Syracuse where he hurdled a defender at the first level and then ended up hurdling another defender on the exact same play. Like just some stupid athleticism. And even for as big as he is, how I guess light on his feet that he can be when it comes to being nimble at times. And again, maximizing that. As you said, Zach, the quickness just isn't there. He does need that runway that we've talked about before. So given that being the opportunity, I think a lot of the good things can come. There were times, I know you highlighted his pass protection. I think there were times in pass pro where he was picking up a blitz and there would be times where he would just flat out get beat or they'd stifle him and get off of his block quickly. And I was like, I was not expecting to see instances of you just flat out losing for all of the reps where you see him flat out win as well. So I think the inconsistency there is something that I don't know that it's going to allow him or afford him opportunities to be out there on third downs or clear passing downs. And while his burst and acceleration and even speed to the outside don't really aid in his game, I do think there's a place for him to be able to, again, curious how that nimbleness fits in at the next level, because if that translates, I think that a lot of first and second down work for him could be a lot of fun in the right space. All of that said, Zach, talk 6 running backs, more running backs to come in the weeks to come. But now we get to talking through our film grades and how we had these guys stacked up against each other. And obviously in coming weeks, we will talk through where the rest of the players fit in amongst all of their peers. But today, it's just these 6. Zach, however you like.
I'll tell you, this class is really difficult. And I think there are, for me, 5 running backs up at the top who the separation between those 5, even though they are completely different backs, completely different styles, succeed in totally different ways. There are 5 running backs in this class that I enjoy enough that I will end up second round picking a lot of them. My running back 1 in this group, my running back 1 overall, is Blake Corum. And I know that's going to be a little bit of a different tack than a lot of people that I've seen. He doesn't necessarily have the explosion, but man, I think he does so much so consistently well that that's my running back 1. Second is Trey Benson. That explosion, that long speed, the ability to potentially be a 3-down back. The next in this group, and this is a nothing in between them, and it's basically the injury discount versus the guy who I think is going to come in and get early down work. It's going to be Braelon Allen at 3, Jonathon Brooks at 4, then Bucky Irving with the pass catching upside, and then all the way back coming to the finish line will be Audric Estime.
Wow. Our film grades could not be more different. for this specific group of 6. And I'll throw this out there when it comes to my field grades. That's not true. Not that they couldn't be more different, but I've got Jonathon Brooks as my 1.
Yeah.
I really wasn't expecting it. But as I continued to just watch, I was like, there is a smoothness and an RB1 future that I feel like could be, I mean, not overall, but like a top 12 running back. Like I just would not be surprised if that's where we see him when he's back to full health. So he has the highest film grade for me, and we'll get into the rest of it. But I've got Blake Corum as number 2 amongst this group. I've got, again, talking film grades, I've got Bucky Irving coming in at 3. And there's a pretty sizable gap between Corum and Irving's score. And then going down, I've actually got Audric Estime and Trey Benson half a point apart. And then I've got Braelon Allen bringing up the rear at 5. And there's a little bit of a gap between Trey Benson and Audric Estime, and then Braelon Allen. I think when I think through this group, I think I'm most excited to be able to leverage those my second round picks for the likes of Brooks and Corum. And I think that, I guess I'm really curious to see this year, in the event that these guys all are just not getting the capital that we're excited about or hoping for, I'm really curious to see how our leagues respond. Because last year, and I was one of the folks, I told you I was running experiments, Zach, last year, to be able to have those later rounds for me be filled with running backs, because I thought last offseason is what this offseason was going to be, with a lot of the changing of spaces and a lot of the old guard flying out, and obviously cheaper options coming in, which is, I think, another thing that speaks to, hey, the second year running back, hang on to these guys. Let's wait. Let's see. But just being able to see all of the change that's taking place, even though we're not excited about this group, in its totality as a class, I think there are spaces that can really lead to a lot of positive things. And so last year's experiment, obviously, that means I missed out on all the Puka, I missed out on all the Tank Dell, and yes, I'm kicking myself for it, trying to run that experiment in a year where we got that. But now we have all these wide receivers this year, Zach, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun during our rookie drafts to be able to parse through all these things.
Yeah, and I think that the sentiment by the time we get to rookie drafts is it's just going to continue to build. That wide receiver wave is going to continue to build, and I think there is going to end up being some value here at running back, because although there's not the high end talent, the top end talent, there's no identifiable Bijan, there's no Saquon, there's no CMC, there's not even a Gibbs. But I think this class starts about where Zach Charbonnet was last year. Like, I think the top end of this class is kind of at a Charbonnet level. And so it's not as bad as people have made it out to be. It's also not good. It's not the strength of this class. So I think you're going to see some value. You're going to see people draft wide receiver in places where they probably should be pivoting to running back and should be pivoting to tight end. And so there's going to be some value with those two positions in the second round, maybe third round. And again, I think there are some good players in this class. I'm excited to talk specifically about a back we're going to talk about next week that I think hasn't gotten a lot of love until the combine. But like that, there are some players in this class at running back. There will be some gems. There will be players that we don't even talk about or that we completely miss that will show up, because there always are. And so that's the fun of this. And it's the fun of this class, and it's why we shifted to running back now, because I want to talk about the running backs. I want to talk about the fact that even though it's a down class, you're still breaking ties in your rankings to running back. Like that's still the play. And so this it's going to be a fun class. It's going to be an interesting class. It's going to be a fun second, third round of rookie drafts to navigate and try to figure out how you're going to make the most of it.
There you have it, folks. Running back part 1 and done. Zach, always a pleasure to be able to be with you. To everybody who's listening via podcast, thank you. You could be listening to any and all things with the 100 plus hours that you have in the week, but the fact that you choose to allow us to be part of it, we're grateful. So thank you. To everybody that came in and checked us out live, thank you for the time. It's always fun to be able to see the chat pop off and have folks comment and give their perspectives as well. Another one down, Zach. Excited to be able to continue going forward next week. Floor is yours.
Absolutely. And next week will be 6 more running backs. It's, for me, and I know you're the same way, it's humbling to me to have so many people popping in and out, so many people listening, so much feedback on it. And we really enjoy that part of this whole process. It's not just us in, the cone of silence talking to each other. It's having this conversation, but having the conversation with all of you too. And that, to me, is what makes it fun, being able to have the conversation and have it be accessible. And I love hearing from other people about this class, about the process, about rookies in general, about strategy. It's great. So keep that in mind. Your portion of the program where you actually affect the content is coming. If you have players that you think we've missed, continue to feed those to us, because we will do the catch-all shows after we do another running back show and the quarterback and tight end show. it'll be catch-all shows until week 4 of the. No, probably we won't get that far, but there are going to be a few catch-all shows to make sure we get the breadth of this wide receiver class and a little bit of the depth of this class as a whole. So we appreciate you rolling with us. We appreciate you listening. I am at Tacit Assassin 13. JMic is at JMic Check. The show is at Dynasty Dummies on Twitter. We appreciate you listening. This has been the Dynasty Dummies. Peace. And somewhere there's an end stream.